So for today, we're going to do a couple of different things to get started. We're going to do, so if any one of you have been to a Chinese restaurant before, even like a takeaway Chinese stall in the food court, something like that, you'll notice that they typically have vegetables and meat ready to go, like it's pre-cooked. And so that's actually really important for, in my opinion, for a stir fry, because what that does, particularly with meat, whether it's prawn, chicken, beef, whatever, it takes away that raw smell by just blanching it in hot water. So the first thing we're going to do before we even pull out the wok is actually just blanch everything really quickly. We'll start with obviously the vegetables, and then we'll work our way through to the meat. And I'll talk through options for vegan and things like that today. I'm doing a chicken stir fry with a bunch of different things in it. So I'd say, keep what you like, replace everything else with more of what you like, if that's how you want to do it. But yes, so we'll do three things. We'll do the sauce to start with, and I'll pull that up here. What I'll start doing, if that's okay, is start sharing my screen, which is going to be my second camera. So most stir fries come with a good sauce. You can get things in a packet like Kathy just shared, or you could just make your own. So what I've done today, and I'll talk through the ingredients in a second, but I will quickly just show you shiitake mushrooms. So these guys were dehydrated shiitake mushrooms, and I've just rehydrated them in hot boiling water is the way to do it if you want to do it quickly. And by quickly, I mean they'll be rehydrated within 30 to 60 minutes roughly. Otherwise, you can soak them overnight in room temperature water, and they'll come up to a complete rehydration as well. What I've done here is rehydrated these guys, and typically when you throw water in it, you'll have a little bit of mushroom stock that's left over that doesn't go into the mushroom but has drawn out some of that mushroom flavor, and that's really good for any sauce. It's got a lot of umami flavor, particularly for vegans, and that's good stuff. So don't throw that stuff away. I've actually kept it, and the reason I want to show you the mushrooms, I wanted to show you where that brown water came from, because maybe it doesn't look so appealing. So what we're going to do today is just a quick sauce, and all I'm going to do is two things, right? I'm going to do oyster sauce. You could also do hoisin sauce. That's very similar to oyster sauce, particularly if you're a vegan, because hoisin is just basically plum sauce, whereas oyster sauce is oysters. Let me pause there. Was there any questions? Because I heard someone speak. Or was that just you, Kathy?
That was just me.
Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of oyster sauce. And look, it's probably about a tablespoon's worth, but I'm just going to eyeball it and just go in there. And the other thing that's going to go in here that's going to make it slightly creamy is cornstarch. So cornstarch doesn't dilute in water, which means that it's funny. Like I'll stir it in now, and it's gonna, after some time, the cornstarch will just settle to the bottom of the cup. So just before I add it later onto the stir fry, I'm gonna need to stir it back in. But you can't sort of, first of all, you can't use hot water when you try to do cornstarch. It's just you just kind of gotta go with the flow with cornstarch. You just kind of gotta stir it in at its pace and kind of mix it all up in there until it's completely dissolved. The more you try to stir it, the more it clumps up, the more it tenses up, and it doesn't want to mix in. So I've just gone in with about a tablespoon's worth of cornstarch. The more cornstarch you put in, the thicker it becomes. So be mindful of that. If you don't want to, and by thick, I mean like, when you talk about like a French sauce or anything where it's got flour in it, it becomes thick like that. So you don't want to put too much of it, but you do want to put enough to give it that creamy texture. So I've put, again, a tablespoon of oyster sauce, about a tablespoon of cornstarch. And I think what was in there was probably about a third cup of reserved mushroom stock. You could just use water. If you wanted to add chicken stock or vegetable stock, you could add that in, but that's plenty of sauce for us right there. That's just going to be used later on. As I cook progressively, I'll just keep adding it. I'm not going to really add anything else. I'm not going to do soy sauce today because it's actually got enough flavor in the oyster sauce. But if you like soy sauce, you can certainly throw that into the mix as well. You can do fish sauce, although fish sauce makes it very Thai or Vietnamese tasting. I tend not to put fish sauce, but if you didn't have mushroom stock, you could maybe just throw a dash in. Fish sauce is less is better because it can be quite strong. And you want to make sure you cook it, otherwise that fishiness lingers. So you want to make sure that actually gets cooked inside the wok. So that's our sauce for today to get started. So I've got myself, I've gone missing from the screen, but I'm still here. I've got myself a pot of boiling water that I've started up just in the interest of time. And that's going to be our base for blanching everything that we need to be blanching today. So put this guy on here. I'm just going to switch cameras so you can, actually, I won't switch cameras yet because I want to show you all the ingredients we're going to be blanching. So let me just put this guy away and bring him over. So here are our vegetables and meat that we'll be doing today. I'm just going to flip him over. Actually, I'll do it this way. So I'm going to go through them one by one. We've got tofu, and we'll do that towards the end, just before the chicken. So that's about 1/4 kilo, yeah, I forget how much that is in pounds. And that's chicken. That's just been diced up chicken breast. And then we've got carrots as well, as you can see in the center. We've got cauliflower down the back. So I've just cut them up into little florets, nothing fancy. And then I've got broccoli as well, cut up into florets, and I've kept the stems. I do like broccoli stems. I think that they're quite nice in terms of, one, I don't like to throw food away, but when you cook them like you would carrots, they actually come out pretty nicely. So we're going to blanch all of these guys in the pot of water that's sitting in front of me over here. So I'm going to switch camera so we can start to look at him. And there we go. So nice steamy hot water. I'm going to go in with the carrots first because they take the longest. And I'm going to do these one at a time. So I'm going to go in with the carrots first, pull them out, and then so on and so forth in that fashion. Actually, just before I put the carrots in, I did not put the salt in because I wanted to show you guys how much salt I'm going to put in here. And it's a ridiculous amount of salt. So that's at least one to 3 tablespoons, depending on how much water you've got. And the reason for it is because we need the salt to wake up the vegetables. So we're not going to eat any of that water. So that's just going to go straight down the drain, or if you want to use it to water your plants once it's cool, that's great. But we're not going to eat it. So that's why I put a lot of salt in there, because I want to make everything taste more like itself. That's what salt's for, as far as my experience has been. So we're going to bring that up to a boil. And I've got my little colander spoon to be able to pull everything out once I've thrown it in. And we're looking at probably carrots will take the longest to cook. We're, in terms of probably a couple of minutes in there in the boiling water once it comes up to a boil. Things like broccoli and cauliflower are not going to take more than 60 seconds because otherwise it gets overcooked. We just basically want to parboil this stuff. We're not cooking it all the way through because we want to finish it off in the wok, but we just want to make sure that and you'll watch everything pretty much brighten up as I cook it, just because it's got salt in there and it's got a little bit of heat. So it just wakes up, and especially tofu. It's really good to do this with tofu because tofu is usually sitting in fermented water, which is good to keep the tofu fresh. But when it comes time to eat it, you do want to blanch it in hot water, just get rid of the smell and the fermented water, but then also the salt kind of really starts to make it taste good. So hopefully that makes sense. Now this has come to a boil, which just means it's ready for my carrots. So that's just going to go in. And I've cut these carrots pretty thin, so they're not going to take very long to cook. But if you cut them thicker, then you're probably going to need to leave them in there longer. So in they go. And we'll continue in that sort of industry or a factory line of blanching until we're done with all the ingredients. Kathy, now I know you tend to be really good with looking up recipes for stir fry. And I know you just mentioned that you've kind of just always done it sort of your way. Were there any recipes you wanted to share from any of the books in the library that you think would be worth it?
I did post one into our Facebook group, and it was, I'm going to have to find it now. No, what I do have, if you would like to participate, I have a poll about stir fries. So while we're kind of getting this going, we could perhaps do that, and we can get more of an idea of what people like in their stir fries. And I apologize if I've left anything off. That's why I have the other button. Okay, so feel free to answer. If you want to put more information, you can pop more information in the chat. So this is basically 3 questions about stir fries, and we'll see how we go with it. So I'm just going to launch it, and feel free to join in and put what you like about stir fry. So the first one is, what is your favorite protein for stir fry? Do you prefer chicken, beef, pork, tofu, or something other than that? I'm not quite sure what else the other would be, maybe chickpeas or something like that. So feel free, if you would like, to pop your answers in there. The second question is, what's your favorite stir fry cuisine? So Thai food, which I'm quite partial to, Chinese, Malay, or is there some other kind that you would prefer? And the third question is, where do you get your recipes from? Do you get from family, friends, word of mouth, internet, cookbooks, or magazines, or other? So mine is experiment. So I'm a huge fan of that MasterChef invention box, and I just chuck everything in together. So sometimes it works, sometimes not so much. So okay, so has everybody popped something in there? Okay, so I think that's everybody, because there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pretty much everyone. So 5 out of 5, 100% people answered. Chicken is the top one, and Chinese, and the next one's it's a tie between the cookbooks and the magazines. So that's pretty, yep, definitely got all of them. I'm just going to end the poll. So let's have a look, and I don't know, share results. There we go. So can you guys see that now? Is that popping up on your screens?
Yes.
So yeah, definitely chicken, which is my number one go-to for anything in any kind of Thai restaurant and stuff. I always go for the chicken.
Yeah.
Tofu is quite up there, and I've never had tofu, so I think I'm going to have to try that next time I go somewhere. I'll get someone else to cook it first, and then I'll compare it with when I eventually cook it. Yeah. Chinese food is, it's leading the charge. And still a tie between the cookbooks and the magazine.
Now these carrots are smelling like they're already, so all I did was wait for the aroma for the carrots to pop up, and that meant it was enough for me to start to take them out. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, you are fine, because we don't want to overcook the carrots.
Yes, we don't, because then they become mushy. So as soon as you start to smell them, and if you're not sure, basically just try taking a bite into them. And if they're still slightly hard but soft on the outer side, they're ready, because they'll spend a bit of time in the wok as well, and that'll completely cook it. But I actually like prawns for stir fry as well. I reckon they make a really good stir fry. But Thai food now, and that's just it, right? I think they do their pad. Pad just means to fry in Thai, which means to stir fry would be, based on the ingredients you'd added. My favorite's pad krapao. That stuff's epic. It's so good. That's where you'd want to throw some fish sauce in for sure. But yes, can't go wrong with stir fries. It's good to see that everyone's into Chinese stir fry though, because for today, that's what I'll be doing. So that worked out quite nicely, but there's so many different kinds. I mean, another protein that you can actually add, and I like your suggestion on chickpeas, but you can actually add tempeh. Do you guys know what tempeh is?
Anybody know?
No. Yeah, so I'm just going in with some cauliflower there. But tempeh is basically, it's really native, I'd say, to Indonesia. Indonesia, it's kind of like fermented soybeans that's compacted into these little sheets, like almost like tofu, except that it's got a lot more texture to it because it's soybean. Soybean is still in there, as opposed to tofu. Tofu is basically soy milk that's been fermented, whereas tempeh, Tempeh, is soybean that's been fermented and mushed together. So they serve as a really good protein, not just because it's protein in terms of, for all the vegans and plant-based folks out there, but also because it's fermented. It's got really good probiotics in it. I like to think almost every culture has a form of probiotic. And so for Indonesians, it's tempeh, much like kimchi for Korean, yogurt for Indian, and so on and so forth. But yeah, tempeh is great. You can buy it at like your Woolies and Coles. You do need to know how to cook it because otherwise it just tastes like tempeh. So it does need a lot of flavoring, but it's a really good protein for a vegan option.
Well, yeah, it's a close guess there for Danny. She's put in that it's fried tofu, question mark.
It's not fried tofu because tofu is still different. So tofu is again based with, so you take your soybean milk and then you kind of put that in the way you would yogurt, and then that kind of curdles and ferments. Whereas this is still it's still soybeans. So soybeans, the little yellow colored little beans, they kind of just get left to ferment. So you don't break down the soybeans, and that texture over time, if I'm correct, because I've not made it before, although I've seen it done, that becomes something that starts to smush together. And so that's why it's got a very chewy texture to it. So it's not fried tofu, because fried tofu is great. I love fried tofu, but that's still tofu. I don't have any tempeh at home, otherwise I'd pull it out and show it to you guys. And if there's any interest, maybe we can do a class on tempeh, because that's certainly fun to cook with. But yes,
yes,
all good, Danny. A quick Google search might help as well, just to see what it looks like.
Okay, well, I can do that, but I'll also jump on to my Facebook group and find that recipe, because I thought it sounded quite nice. And I know I put it in the event that I put up there, and it's a private Facebook group, but anyone can join it. You just need to answer yes to the agree to the terms and conditions, and we'll let you in.
Might be worth sharing that as well, Kathy, just in case anyone's interested in joining the group, because there's great stuff on there. It's not just for cooking stuff, but there's like lots of authors that you guys feature.
Reading recommendations, there's author chat, there's all sorts of things. Okay, so this recipe that I found, Dailan and mushroom five-spice stir fry, which sounded really good. So I'm gonna just I'm going to copy and paste what I've put in there. And if you're not a member of the library, you can jump online and join online there. But it did seem really nice, and then I didn't get around to making it. So
I'm just reading it on my end here. Let me put this guy down. So it looks like a 5-spice stir fry with gailan. Oh, right, gailan. Gailan is basically Chinese broccoli.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, that's right. So I didn't keep the cauliflower in there for very long, if you guys were paying attention, because cauliflower becomes mushy very quickly. And you'll watch me now put this in for even lesser amount of time. But watch this broccoli now and how dull it looks. I might actually keep one broccoli out just to show you the difference. But these guys are going to brighten up really quickly. But yes, gailan is Chinese broccoli, which is different from pak choy, which looks like gailan. So they're all kind of very, very delicious vegetables, and they make for a great stir fry. And I like how they've done it with mushroom and 5-spice. So 5-spice is such a fantastic, it's like the Chinese version of garam masala. It brightens up everything. So you can use it for meat, you can use it for vegetables, and it does a really great job of making things taste good. There's like 5 different spices in it. That's it. I'm already pulling it out, just if you're watching me, because that's enough in terms of just blanching it. Otherwise it becomes mushy as well. So that's done. And then I am doing the broccoli sticks separately because I think that they take a little bit longer to cook. So I've separated them out. This is just the florets.
So when you blanch them, can you blanch them ahead of time and then come back and cook them in the evening? So say you've got people coming over for dinner, can you blanch these things, pop them in the fridge, or
exactly.
And then just pull them out when you're ready to cook?
Yeah, because stir fries are best had fresh. So even if you didn't want to eat, like if you wanted to cook stir fry every day, right? Like just really quickly, just put it together and cook it. You can pre-blanch everything. It won't last a whole week, probably up to 4 days in the fridge, and that's fine, like the vegetables and the meat as well. And it's ready to go, and then you just kind of toss everything in and you have a freshly cooked meal. So whether it is that you have a party and you want to pre-prepare it and just kind of toss it up at the end, or if you want to do it for the food prep for the week ahead, you can do both. So here, let me quickly show you. This guy is cooked versus not cooked, and it's just so much brighter in terms of, like, throwing this into a stir fry, it'll still get cooked, but it won't get that sort of color and richness and just kind of it'll taste more like a broccoli as well. Because I say this because I've made this mistake. I'm just going to pop him in to cook him as well. I used to do stir fries without pre-cooking anything, and it's great because the sauce makes it taste good. But what happens is the ingredients kind of don't really come together for that reason. So that's why blanching it becomes so great. But Kathy, back to you. I know you were in the middle of a sentence.
Oh, I can't remember now. I'm trying to just I did a snippy so that I didn't have to ruin your screen setup by sharing
Yes.
my screen.
Did you want to? Because I can stop sharing really quickly.
I'll just save it to my desktop and then
pop it into the chat.
Yeah, I'll pop it into the chat there, and everyone can have a quick peek at what's in there if I've got it clear enough.
Yay. We're almost done with the blanching for those that are starting to get hungry.
Okay, let's see, file. That's what we want.
I'm not going to wait for the water to come back up to a boil because the broccoli stems are actually quite delicate. They're just a bit thicker than the florets. And so I reckon they're ready to go. And I'll throw them in with the carrots when I fry them. So again, that probably was not more than 2 minutes in there, probably more like 90 seconds. But yeah, and that's it. So even they've brightened up.
Yes,
everything just kind of wakes up when you throw it into salty hot water.
And I do like that the broccoli stems. I used to always just shove them in the worm farm and not think anymore about it. But now I've just sort of I trim them up a bit like carrots, and they actually go into the other veggie things quite well. So I've popped it up there. It's called Capture. Oh, good question, Joanne. Do you need to limit the meat to one kind, or could you put both chicken and beef together in the stir fry?
You could definitely do that. You could do chicken and prawns. You can mix everything together, but I probably put beef in. No, actually you could. So what I'm doing today, so I'm sorry, who asked the question? Just so I know I'm talking.
Joanne.
Joanne, yeah. So Joanne, you could definitely do, you can do all kinds of meats together, because they actually dishes when you go out to Asian restaurants that actually do like a mixed stir fry, which adds everything. So you could definitely do that. In terms of the cooking time, I'd say, if you were doing prawns in there, which you're not suggesting, but if you were, that would need a really quick 30 seconds blanch in this sort of setup. Whereas the beef and the chicken and the prawns, you can probably put in for a lot longer, and you'd blanch them in separately as well, so they don't start to commingle until they make it into the stir fry. But you could definitely mix it up for sure. Good question.
Be an interesting taste too, having the two different meats in there.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the blanching does. It actually kind of takes out the raw taste of chicken or beef or pork or prawns or what have you, which is why it has a very clean finish. So it tastes like chicken, but it's not like raw chickeny taste. It's just chicken. So when you start to put those proteins together, even today I'm using it with tofu, but if you do beef and pork or chicken, they actually don't start to taste odd. Like chicken will taste like chicken and beef will taste like beef, and they'll just be kind of hanging out in the plate together, as opposed to trying to kind of overpower each other, if that makes sense. And that happens because you blanch it separately and kind of seal the flavor in before you stir fry it.
Because I know even when you cook I don't know if it says it on here because I didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
You see. No, so it's just saying cook the chicken and then add the vegetables. But I know sometimes if you do that, you do end up with the meat or the chicken kind of gets that a weird sort of watery,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you call it really, on over it, and you kind of end up with quite a watery, almost like a stock kind of taste to it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you do chicken and you cook chicken with a little bit of oil and salt, water comes out of it, and that creates that sauce, which is something you want, but not necessarily at the start of the stir fry. So another way to do any kind of stir fry, like regardless of your meat, if you don't want to blanch it, is cook the chicken first and take it out. And then in that same, along with the juices. And then in that same pan, you can start with whatever. So your garlic, your ginger with a bit of oil, get that heated up. Either, maybe go in with the carrots and other things first because the chicken would have been cooked. And then you can add the chicken a little bit later on. In fact, if you do chicken that way, I'm going to be adding Chinese rice wine to the wok. But what I'd recommend just to be clear, for today, we're blanching everything. And so I'm adding stuff to the stir fry separately to create the flavors in the stir fry. But if you wanted to use raw chicken, raw beef, raw pork, and you wanted to cook that in the wok, as I mentioned, do it at the start and take it out, but marinate it first. So you'd go in with the raw chicken, like this sort of chicken in here at the moment. You'd go in with salt, some Chinese rice wine, and honestly, some cornstarch, because the cornstarch will absorb any extra water and kind of give that chicken or beef or pork the outer layer of crunchiness. But you don't want to do that and continue on the stir fry. You want to do that, take it out, do everything else, and then put the meat back in later on. So that's another way to do stir fry, completely delicious and valid way. I'm just doing it this way for today. So hopefully that helps clarify maybe in terms of the question sort of you were saying, Kathy.
Okay, so where are we up to?
We are almost done. I've just wanted to cover up the tofu and bring that water up to a boil. The tofu is ready. It's already good to go in terms of eating it, but I'm trying to get the water heated up for the chicken, because the chicken does need to be blanched at boiling hot water. And that's the last thing for us to blanch before we get to the wok. So I'm going to quickly pull these guys out, bring that water up to a heat, and then we can finish up the chicken and get going. Were there any other questions while I patiently did this?
No questions in there that I can see. So I was having a look to see what was in 5 spice. Oh no, we were going to look up tempeh, weren't we? That's what I was going to look up. I did the recipe. So yes. How did you spell it again?
Tempeh. Just going to cover that and bring it up to the boil. And then once you're done with that, Kathy, maybe we can chat about what next class will be about, because we talked about in keeping with a simple theme. So let's brainstorm what makes sense for us to do next.
Okay, so made by fermented soybeans. Tempeh is a traditional Indonesian food made from fermented soybeans, made by a natural culturing and controlled fermentation process that binds soybeans into a cake form.
That's a much better description.
A fungus, Rhizopus, they haven't given the phonetic thing there. Anyway, a fungus, Rhizopus orzae, I don't know, is used in the fermenting process and is known as a tempeh starter. So there you go. Now, I don't know if that is what we were looking up, but
I think it does.
There, I think it pretty much covers what you said anyway. So
yeah, that water's coming up to a boil. While it does, I'll quickly show. Well, I won't show you everything else yet because I'll bring that tray over in a second. But I will show you. So this is something I'm going to garnish the stir fry with, which is toasted sesame seeds. It's completely optional. Some people are actually allergic to sesame. So certainly don't use it if you are, and you can replace the sesame oil that I'm using today with just vegetable oil if you have an allergy, but otherwise this will be garnish on top. So once we're done cooking, and typically when it's actually going onto the serving plate rather than while it's still in the pot or wok is when you'd want to sprinkle some of this on top. It gives a little bit of crunch, gives a little bit of sweetness to the dish. But yeah.
Danny's just saying she's tried tempeh before and it was good, but she also said it's good to know what she was eating.
It is handy, isn't it?
Oh, you're so trusting, Danny. So trusting.
Well, I'm not surprised, Danny. You've been to Southeast Asia and spent some time there with your husband. So I was wondering when you would go. Yes, I've had that before, but yes, we eventually got there.
All
right.
Okay, how's it going there?
Yes, the water is coming to a boil. So I'm just going to go in with the chicken. This goes in, and then I'm going to just get a separate bowl to replace it or take it out with, because that's going to be partially cooked. So I'm just going to open that up and just really quickly stir it around. Again, it's going to be raw in the middle still, and cooked on the outside. And that's all I need. I just want to take away that chicken smell. And this is pretty much what's done with most, like if you make a pad thai, if you make any kind of stir fry noodles, unless you're doing it the other way that I mentioned, typically this is how it's done, so that it doesn't have that raw taste going into the dish, which interferes with the flavor. But yes, as you can see, it's not fully cooked. It's almost pink, but just white on the outside. It's definitely still pink on the inside. And it's the last thing that goes in, because I don't want to use this water now because it's got potentially some salmonella in there. And next up, I'll be taking this out and putting the wok here instead. So if you don't have a wok, that's totally fine. You can just use a saute pan, which will be better than a pot. If you don't have a saute pan, then I suppose a pot will do. Hopefully something that's not too deep, certainly not a stock pot. But yes, if you have, these days they sell like Teflon woks and stuff. So if you've got one of those, brilliant. I'll be using a stainless steel wok today. There's so many different types of woks. There's a cast iron wok, stainless steel, carbon steel, and everything else. I like stainless steel for stir fry because it doesn't need a lot of hard, deep fried cooking. So it works brilliantly with stir fry.
So is there a particular ratio of meat to vegetables that you go with, or is it just whatever you prefer?
Look, I'll say it's honestly what you prefer. But I do have the recipe card up on my Instagram account, and I can share that with you, Kathy, to send out to folks if
Sure.
you want at the end of class. But if you guys follow me on social media, I typically post up the recipe before class in case you want to cook along with me during. But yes, in there, look, it's for today, I've got 250 grams of chicken, 250 grams of tofu, and about 300 grams of, 200 to 300 grams of everything else, roughly, including the mushrooms, about 150 grams. So some people like meaty stir fries. They want just like maybe, a sliver of vegetable in there. Like there's one stir fry that I love, which is just broccoli and prawns. And that's usually, 2/3 broccoli, 1/3 prawn with garlic. So it's really what you prefer. But yeah, today it's kind of like, kind of 1/3 protein, 2/3 vegetables. That's what I've gone with today, roughly. But yes, so hopefully that answers the question, Kathy.
Yep, sure does.
This is my ginormous wok. I'm going to put this stuff away and quickly just go back to the other camera so you can take a look at some of the other ingredients that's going to be going in here. Looks like I missed it. There we go. So I'm just going to switch this off actually just really quickly while I walk you through the rest of the ingredients. This guy's just going to sit on the side because it's ready to be tossed. So here are the other ingredients that we're going to be using today. Oh. Now, we talked about the stuff that you used, Kathy, which is the same here. I've just got fresh garlic. You're more than welcome to use the stuff in the bottle. And as well, ginger. The only difference here is ginger is actually cut into matchstick pieces, which work really well in a stir fry. And you may have seen that kind of slicing done for other types of Chinese cuisine. I will be frying the sesame oil in the ginger first because it gives the ginger a cooked taste that allows you to actually eat the ginger, but it also flavors the oil with ginger. So it goes both ways. You don't have to do it. You can certainly use minced ginger, but that makes it sort of an extra, like, I want to have a gingery stir fry. That's what makes it very gingery to do it that way. Garlic's completely optional. I just had 4 cloves sitting on the countertop, so I decided to throw it in. You don't have to put garlic for this recipe. Sometimes, there's a nice clean ginger flavor that you're after. get rid of the garlic if you want that. Otherwise, it starts to interfere with the taste. But both are aromatic, so it's really up to you. I have a lot of chili here. This is very, very not spicy chili. It's long red chilies. You can go with half or none if you don't like chili or don't want to eat anything spicy, or you can have it on the side to serve with the dish. I'm just going to throw it in because I like the bite it gives, and also cooking it makes it less spicy for this type of chili, which is the long chilies. And then I've got
the same ones that you put in. Sorry, are they the same ones that you decorated the massaman curry with?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the long ones. They're not the bird's eye chili. Those are some seriously hot chilies by my count, and I can eat spicy. So this ones are the longer ones that still, I think they call cayenne pepper, which you can get in Coles or Woolies. Still a bit spicy. So not saying that it's completely got no spice kick to it, but certainly much less, very moderate, relatively speaking. So that's them. Water chestnuts. Now, these guys have come straight out of a can, so you can certainly get them sliced and ready to use. A can usually has about 100-ish grams in there once you drain all the water out. They're great for stir fry. Like they don't need to be cooked. You can actually eat them. You can even put them in a salad. They're crunchy, and no matter how much you cook them, they stay crunchy because that's just how water chestnuts are. They've got a nice watery texture. So they brighten up a lot of stir fries. I love using them in almost every stir fry, and I like it that you can just grab them pre-sliced and ready to cook. So you can definitely think about adding that. It's got no distinct flavor to it as well, so it kind of just adds another level of texture to the stir fry. So you have your chewy chicken or tofu, and then your crunchy vegetables. This one adds that sort of really crispiness to it. And then finally, mushrooms. So I've thrown mushrooms in today. I don't usually, because I do like shiitake mushrooms. And I've sliced them up into bite-sized pieces so that they're not the complete mushroom, although you can certainly keep them that way. I just like to have everything in bite-sized form. And then we've got this guy here, which is the sesame oil I'm going to be cooking with, which is, you can substitute that with vegetable oil. Don't do peanut oil because peanut oil has a very high smoking point and you'll burn everything in the wok for that reason. Or you can use peanut oil, but try not to let the wok or pot get too hot. Sesame oil's good like that. It's hot, but not, the smoking point's not too high. And then we've got Chinese cooking wine, which I mentioned before. If you wanted to use chicken raw and cook it raw, you'd add that and salt and Chinese rice wine to marinate to cook separately with cornstarch. I'm also going to throw some white pepper in, but I'll do that from my grinder. I like white pepper because it's just got that Asian taste. I wouldn't put black pepper if you don't have white pepper, just omit it. But yeah, that leaves us with getting ready to cook. If everyone's ready for that.
We ready to go?
Ready to go. I'm going to switch cameras, but I'll quickly show you that stock that I made. Can you see that white line at the bottom? That's the cornstarch having just kind of sat back down. So just slowly stirring it, very, very slowly stirring it will start to mix it back up. But that's what it does. It just doesn't dilute into the water. It doesn't know how to do that. And so that it goes from dark brown to creamy brown again. So I'm going to have that ready to go in periodically as I'm cooking. But I'm just going to switch back up to this camera over. If I can get my mouse to cooperate with me, that would be great. There we go. Hopefully that brings us to, yeah, there we go. I'm going to go in with about a tablespoon worth of oil. I'm going around the corner so that it starts to drip towards the center. You can see that it's already very hot, which is fantastic. That's how I want it. It's going to drop it a little bit so my house doesn't entirely smoke up. I'm going to go in with the ginger first, as I mentioned. So that goes in and you can hear it to start to sizzle and fry. That's what we want. We want that little brown sizzly taste. Might go in with just a smidge more oil. Yep, perfect. And I'm not going to leave that for very long, otherwise it'll burn. I'm going to go in with the chilies next because I like chilies in the oil as well. It gives that flavor. I should have said this is going to happen very fast in all of 5 minutes. I'm going to go next in with the chicken, not the garlic, because the garlic will burn.
So is this on the hottest heat that you can put it on?
Yeah. Sorry, it's a bit noisy. The answer to that was yes. I've actually dropped it to medium now because I didn't want to burn the ginger, and I've kept it at medium because it seems to be hot enough. And that seems to be good in terms of it continuing to cook the chicken. And you'll see that the chicken has these little brown bits on it now because it's searing in the wok, and that's what I want. I'm going to go in now with a tablespoon of Chinese rice wine. I'm just eyeballing this, but about a tablespoon just to deglaze it.
It's a very action one today.
Yes.
Danny said she didn't know not to use peanut oil in stir fry, and neither did I. And even the recipe I put up there has peanut oil.
No, you can certainly, because it gives that peanutty flavor. In fact, I think they use it a lot with Thai cooking. The only problem is that you have to be careful not to let it heat too high, because then it'll burn some of the vegetables. So you saw that I used sesame oil and still got some of that charring on the chicken. That's what we're looking for. So if you are able to do that with peanut oil and just manage the heat, then that should be fine. Yeah.
Just don't want to set off your smoke alarms.
This is the thing, and you don't want to kill all the nutrients in the vegetables as well, because that's what'll happen. So in terms of the smoke point being too high, so I'm going to go in with the garlic now, and you'll notice that I didn't fry it up at the start because I've minced it really fine. And if I go in, it'll just burn, and burnt garlic is very bitter. We don't want bitterness in our stir fry. So I'd rather saute it with the chicken and the Chinese rice wine. So that's pretty much ready for me to add the next sort of tough vegetable, a hard vegetable, which for me is going to be the broccoli sticks and the carrots. So I just want to give that garlic 30 seconds. And then I'm going to throw in, yeah, that's good. I'm going to go in with the vegetables. So that chicken's cooked all the way through now, with all the heat that's sort of in there. And it's just going to be a matter of adding all the vegetables now. And I'm just looking at the fire because I'm not used to cooking in this portable stove. The heat's not as hot. So I'm going to give that a couple of minutes to just heat, and then I'll stir it. The only things I have left to go in are the water chestnuts, which don't need to be cooked, so that can be added towards the end. The mushrooms, that probably needs to go in before anything else. And then we've got sitting on the side here, you can't see it, is the broccoli, the cauliflower, and the tofu. Again, all already cooked, just needs to be added in.
The colors are great.
Yes, very bright and happy.
I could picture everyone getting this prepared, you know, and just having a couple of stir fries during the week and not having to think too much about it. So you could do Sunday, you can chop up all the vegetables and stuff and blanch them and just have them ready to go for the first midweek or Monday night meal kind of thing. Yeah.
And you can even switch up the protein. So you can do like, oh, I'm going to do chicken today. I'm going to do prawn tomorrow. Get some iron in on Wednesday because I want to do some pork, and so on and so forth. So you really get to have that sort of versatility to it as well. Just going to switch on the exhaust fan in my kitchen. Otherwise, it's going to smoke up the joint. So I'm going to go in next with the mushrooms, as I said, just to kind of get those tossed in there.
Are you still on kind of a medium heat?
I turned it all the way up because I think my gas burner is running low, so it's not as hot. But at this point, because everything's already cooked, you wouldn't need to bring the heat back up to high. You keep it at medium, so long as it's not burning the vegetables. So if it's starting to burn, what I typically do is drop it back down to low. And then once it's kind of calmed down, I'll bring it back up to whatever heat I want it to be at. That's cooking. Give that another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll throw. So it's about 30 seconds to a minute, and then you keep adding stuff in.
How do you think zucchinis would go in that? Because I know quite often zucchinis
Yep.
are one of the main vegetables, but then I
Yeah.
worry that they're going to go too much.
So I think zucchinis probably don't need to be pre-cooked just because they already they're quite juicy and quite tender. I'd add them towards the end. The other thing you could do is if you slice up zucchini is to just on a really high heat, just kind of flash fry them in just a drop or two of oil, just to give them an outer layer that's crusty. That's extra work. So if you don't want to do that, just add them toward the end so that they don't completely mush up. But that's a good one to add in.
Nothing like your zucchini dissolving in your cooking. You can't even see it.
And also zucchini is just really calorie free. So it's a good one to add because it's not very, very like it's not a very hefty vegetable that way. So it's nice and light and fresh. So yeah, good one. They always add them in restaurants when you order, right? So
yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna go in with the cauliflower. The only two things I have left are I'll just pop them up here so you can see them. The broccoli, the tofu, and the water chestnuts. Excuse me.
It's all that chili going.
It's that chili that's come into the air. So I'm just going in with white pepper now. And you're like, Rash, if it's chili and you can barely breathe, why are you adding white pepper? Because white pepper is not spicy. It's more about the flavor. That's why I said not to add black pepper if you don't have white pepper. So just an option there.
So by adding the vegetables or the ingredients, one ingredient at a time, does that allow it? Because I would imagine if they're kind of coolish vegetables, you don't want to put a whole heap in to the hot, like you've got the chicken already baking hot in there.
Yeah.
And then you go and add heaps and heaps of cold vegetables. I would imagine it would drop the temperature right down too quickly.
That's right. And also so that's spot on. And also the other thing would be because some of these things have different cooking times. So I went in with the carrots and the cauliflower, and to an extent the mushrooms, because the mushrooms were completely raw and dehydrated. So that's the main reason, just making sure that I'm allowing enough cooking time. But you're right to also say that, yeah, it just drops the temperature of the wok, which defeats the purpose of trying to cook it at a high heat. So. And if you do have a wok, the other thing it prevents is charring. So, or the technical term is wok hay, which basically means because the wok is so hot, it introduces just a charring, whether you're doing stir fry vegetables or noodles or anything, that only a wok can do. And when you add everything all at once, and also the other reason why I'm adding sauce a little bit at a time is that brings the temperature down as well. So, yeah. Hopefully that's making sense to everyone.
Just hang out if it isn't making sense, or pop a message in the chat.
Yeah.
We'll try and make a lot more sense.
Yes, a lot more sense. So that's the last of the vegetables going in there. So I'm just gonna mix that in and add a little bit more sauce. So I'm sort of not maybe gonna use all of this because I think it doesn't need it. I might save the sauce, and you can save the sauce for, again, you can make the sauce in advance as well and save it for the week ahead, right? So that's always an option.
That will keep that sauce.
Say that again.
That will keep, like
yeah, for about 4 days maximum with the mushroom water. If you just made it with chicken stock as well, if you made it with water, it would last longer because you've just got oyster sauce and you've got, I think I put in there oyster sauce, cornstarch. So that'll last up to a week if it's just got water in there. All right, we're almost done.
It's looking good.
And that was the water chestnut going in. I'll give it a quick taste. Typically, because of the oyster sauce and the salt that I've cooked the vegetables in, I won't need to season it, typically. Sometimes you just need to double check to make sure. So I'll give that a taste to make sure it's got enough flavor in there. And this salt, like, hopefully I can get to the bottom, but this stir fry is not very soupy. Yep. So let me just tip it over. There's no soup in there. So I have about yay much more sauce. If I wanted to make it a sort of a saucy stir fry, I could now add that. I will, just to make sure I get everything coated, because I want the broccoli florets to absorb. So you know how when you bite into a broccoli floret and it's got this juiciness in it? That's what I'm going for right now. I'm hoping it all gets absorbed in there.
Yeah, they do tend to pop in your mouth a little bit, the broccoli, when it's got that sauce in there. It just gets caught up in it.
That and the shiitake mushrooms as well, because they tend to absorb. If you're not using the fresh ones, the dry ones will absorb anything and everything around it. So they act like sponges that way, which means if you rehydrate it slightly in the pan, meaning to say, I'm going to rehydrate the mushrooms in hot water and take some of that stock, but I also want to not rehydrate it all the way. It'll get cooked and it'll pull the sauce from the stir fry in, which is great. So you guys saw me add that sauce. Let's see now if there's any sauce at the bottom. I don't think there is. Yeah, it all got absorbed into the stir fry. So I think that was just like one drop that started to come out at the very end. Yeah, so that's great. So it's a nice stir fry. It's not a soupy, slushy stir fry. Otherwise, I would put less sauce in there if it was starting to get slurry, because that's not a good stir fry, I think. Some people like it, but typically a good stir fry is the sauce is sticking to all the food and it tastes great. But yeah, that's it. It's ready to go. I'm just going to quickly taste to make sure that the flavors are good. And probably the thing that takes the longest to cook is the carrots and the chicken. So I'm going to just quickly try one piece and make sure that it's cooked all the way through, which I think it is from having pierced it, but that's really good. That's really, really good. I could add a little bit more salt, but I'm not going to. Because it probably could use a bit of salt, but I don't like things too salty. At this point, if you wanted to add salt after tasting it, you could always do soy sauce. Because soy sauce kind of adds not just saltiness, it adds a little bit more flavor than that. But yes, I think it's great. And I'm just leaving it in the wok now, as you can see, because it's smoking up, because I want to give it a bit of charring. You don't have to do this, but I like it because it gives it a little bit more flavor to the outer layers of the vegetables and the meat. But other than that, it's ready to go. So I'm going to start plating. I'm going to move these guys away.
I'm going to say, what does everyone prefer, noodles or rice with their stir fry?
Good question. What do you guys reckon?
I think it depends on the stir fry. Oh, Susie's gone rice. Yep.
Rice. Yep.
From Sharon. Oh, noodles from Danny. I do like pad thai, I have to admit. That's one of my favorite things.
Pad thai
David
noodles.
likes rice.
Mm-hmm.
Danny has noodles. Actually, I'm quite happy either way. Like I don't have a preference. But generally speaking, I do use rice only because most of the time I have rice in the cupboard.
Rice is easy to make, right? Because good quality noodles, you're better off making if you want it, but that's a lot of work. So you can always buy the packet ones that you showed at the start.
These ones.
Yeah, like the wakas.
Yeah, they actually turned out quite good. And David said basmati rice.
Stir fry probably goes a little bit better with jasmine rice. Basmati rice is good because so I'm switching that off because it's noisy. Basmati rice is good because it separates nicely and you can eat it. But typically with stir fries, if you're doing a Chinese stir fry or Thai stir fry, the stickiness of the jasmine rice, even if it's long grain, is actually good. So it's up to you. Honestly, it's personal preference. Eat what you enjoy.
Or eat what the supermarket has available. I did shopping and I actually bought jasmine rice. It was the only packet of rice on the shelves. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I'm like, this rice is more sticky than long grain rice. So it does have a stickier texture.
Yeah. So there's so many different types of rice, but long grain jasmine rice is probably, and it's typically fragrant. That's typically what they'll serve with Thai food. Because Thai food, you have to think about it as being slightly Indian, but slightly Oriental. It's kind of the happy medium. So long grain fragrant jasmine rice is what typically is used for Thai food. Chinese, depending on northern versus southern. So northern cuisine, not always, but northern cuisine will be more wheat-based. So they won't even eat rice, or they will, but it's more of a delicacy. They'll eat more noodles made with wheat. Whereas southern China will eat more either rice or rice noodles. So because they grow more paddy fields down south. So so depending on the type of rice that's grown, to come back to your question, was yeah, there's certain type of short grain rice that's sticky, and that goes all the way down to Japan, where you've got sushi rice or glutinous rice, versus the ones that grew sort of in the cooler regions that tend to be more like basmati rice or long grain jasmine rice. So there's so many different types of rice, and then South Indian cuisine has sambar rice. Like they have a completely different type of rice that they use, even though it's Indian, they don't use basmati rice. So yeah, there's all different kinds of rice. Which I think, but I'm doing noodles today, surprisingly enough.
Now we've had that whole conversation.
Now that we've had that whole conversation,
we're gonna go noodles.
Yes, but rice is perfect. Like just go with, I wouldn't do glutinous rice, but I do long grain jasmine rice be a good one. Or if you wanted to do short grain, that's fine, especially if you've got like saucy sort of a finish. If you prefer that, the short grain rice, the stickiness and the sauce, I think goes really well together. If that's something you're into, I think definitely do short grain, but otherwise long grain's good. And purple rice, I tend to throw in with all my food because it's healthy, or it's called black rice or forbidden rice. But when you cook it, it comes out purple. So there you go. So that's the stir fry done. I've been chatting away. It's just sitting there and staring back at you. I'm gonna switch cameras so you can see what we've got set up over here. Let's see now. Hopefully that goes straight to that. Yep. I've got my yellow noodles, which is this is just thin egg noodles, and some chili with a little bit of soy sauce to go with it. And we would just typically take a little bit of the stir fry and serve it up on a plate. And we would do a little bit of sesame seed, the toasted one that I showed you earlier, sprinkled on top, and it'll be ready to serve. Lunch is served, or dinner, or whichever you prefer, be ready to go.
Any time of the day.
Any time of the day is good, yeah. Anytime you're hungry, really. So I just taken that up, put that there. Hopefully you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
And a little chili, and just go in with a little bit of sesame seed on top. You can even do that on the noodles a little bit if you like, but and if the noodles are either taste bland, you can always throw a bit of soy sauce in there. And I like a little bit of white pepper on top too, because that just makes it yum. And there you go. Simple stir fry.
Yum.